Hi, this is Howard V2AED, and I'm going to show you today how to add the auxiliary optional crystal filters to the Yaesu FTDX101. This is an MP. I also have a D, and I'm going to do the video on the MP, but they're both the same. So I'll push pause for now, and what I'm going to do is remove the 16 screws. There are 16 on the bottom cover. The screen is facing me. Okay, so now that it's open, this is receiver number 1 and this is receiver number 2, the sub receiver. So we're going to work on receiver 1, and the first thing that's important is to remove 7 coaxial connectors. These 7 connectors, I'll try to move the camera so you could see this a little better. I'm not the best cameraman, but these connectors are micro miniature. And the best way that I found to remove them without squeezing them hard, because when you turn around and look at them, they're snap-on type coax connectors, very small. But you have to lift them straight up. And so the best pliers for that would be a serrated pair of almost needle nose. These are less than needle nose in that they don't flex as easily, so you have a more solid grip. Again, you don't want to squeeze the connector. So I'm going to be removing them, and there are colors on the connectors, so you can just follow the colors through. On the right-hand side is J. Let me just look at this for a sec. I'm also following a paper that was published on the net, by the way, but I think it's better that you see me do this, so at least you'll gain confidence in this process. These connectors are all colored. And so, as an example, J10 is on the far right, closest to the front, and that one is red. So you pull that one off. Then you go over to J12, which has a little green ink on it, and you pull that one straight off. The next one after that, on the left side also, following J12, just behind it, is J11. And so I'm going to grab that one. I wish I could show you a close-up, and just pull it straight up, and it's off. And you don't squeeze it because you don't want to tighten the finger stock on it. So that's 3 so far. Then we have to go over to J09, and that's on the back. And there are some you don't have to disconnect, so you have to follow through. There are only 7 that have to come off. And J09 is black, and so you'll find the black one, and you carefully, you hear it snapping off. That's J09. And then J01, which is red, and we've got to find that one. And it's here, and a little difficult. Yeah, I'm going to get needle nose for that because I have to get in there and I don't want to stress anything. Although I can turn that connector slightly and then it will pull straight up, but I think I'd rather get good needle nose pliers for that. So I just popped off J01, the red one, with these needle nose. As you see, they're much finer. And of course then we're going to go and do 2 more at the back. There's J02, which is no marking, and J01, which is red, has a red dot. So we'll go and do 02. The board is labeled very well, by the way, so I have no problems with the circuit board. So J02 has no marking, and I'll use my serrated ones for that since they have a better grip and they don't require pressure. That's important. There's 02, and 02 has no marking. And finally, J03, which is green, and that's on the back left, sort of about an inch from the or 2.5 centimeters from the left side of the board. So I'm going to do that green one, J03. That's it. So now that we've done those, we should have 7 disconnected, and we do. Now the next thing we're going to remove are the 2 flexible printed circuit boards. Those are these ribbon cables here that you might call them, but these are known as FPCs. And they have a little blue thick plastic tab. So you've just got to grab them, or you could use your serrated needle nose and lightly, don't squeeze them hard, just pull them straight out. And actually I prefer to use my fingers for this. And you want to lift it equally from both sides so that you don't end up pulling it out offset or crooked. See, as you can see, that came out. And of course, now I'm going to do J05. That was J04. And this one's easy because it's a small connector. It must be about 15 pins. So as you see, they're out. Now I'm going to remove 6 screws from the board. And there are only 6. There's back to front, there are 3 on the left side and 3 on the right side. Now, it's important to use the right tools, especially screwdrivers, when you're opening up a radio, especially a lot of radios built in the Orient, because they don't use hardened steel screws the way we do. There's a reason for that, by the way. I know that I was in business for a long time, and we used to have to do that because there's a quota on steel being shipped in from some of the countries into the US and Canada. And so this literally lowers the quota for that country if they ship in everything with steel screws. Often they don't. I'm not saying they don't always do that, but it's quite often that they'll use a softer metal. And so I used a number 2 screwdriver to open up the cover, because that screw is a perfect snug fit and you won't scratch the head. And I'm using a 1 to take off the board. By the way, I thought I'd show you a real neat tool that I use. So on the screwdriver, I have a magnetizer, demagnetizer. You could probably buy these at any model airplane store. And there's the look of what it is. And so you go into magnetize and you do this. And the beautiful thing is, when you're ready to take out a screw, it just comes right out and stays on the screwdriver. And I'll do the second one. I've already done the first. I'll show you how well that works. See, you lift out and you've got the screw on the screwdriver. So I'm going to do all 6. Once you've removed all 6 screws, you can now just pull out the receiver. So you just lift it up by the crystal filters that are on the board, and you pull it backwards so that the jacks come through the back of the chassis. And you carefully just unhook it from anything it might be stuck on. And there's your receiver from the Yaesu. As you can see, these are the crystal filter sockets. And because this is I should light this up a little more. I'll try. This being an MP, it only needs 1 crystal filter option. And that'll be the 1.2 kilohertz filter. So I'll go get one of those. I managed to get filters for both sides, and I'm going to tell you where to buy those filters, by the way, because Yaesu insists on you sending this radio back to them to do this. But if you feel confident enough that you can handle it, then you ought to buy the filters. They won't let you. And I've even asked them if they could just disclaim the warranty if any damage is caused by the deinstallation, that they could understand. In other words, if a final blows, that shouldn't be part of the non-warranty that you've lost. But if something goes wrong on this board that you've removed, then of course that's your fault. So I'm going to now go get a crystal filter and put it in. So here's the 128SN, and I'm going to open up the package. The 128SN is of course the main receiver filter for 1.2 kilohertz. By the way, the filter is not static sensitive, so don't be afraid. Just don't bang it on something because you could break the crystals on it. Now, the filter may not be symmetrical, so it's advisable, symmetrical in performance, in to out, because I didn't design this filter. I don't feel like measuring the insertion loss or the matching impedances. So I'm just going to put these in exactly in the same alignment as the original filters. In other words, you have the words Yaesu running across the board on 3 filters. This is the 3 kilohertz, this is the 600, and this is the 300. In case you had to go out and buy the 300 for your FTDX101, whatever it's called, not MP, but D like Delta. So I'm just going to put that in and solder it. So I'm just soldering the filter in. I have my finger pressed underneath the filter, and I'm just supporting the iron, and I'm going to just heat the material and melt the solder. Now that's a nice fillet or fillet of solder where it just wicks up and looks just great. I'm going to do the other 4 terminals very carefully as well. They're the main crystal filter terminals. Once you've soldered in the 1.2 kilohertz filter, of course you have long pins. You could look at my soldering and it's pretty clean. It looks like factory. But of course you've got longer leads. You've got to trim them right down flat, because if you don't, you can have crosstalk between input and output, and you wouldn't want that. That would actually lower the rejection of the filter off the skirts. It would probably make the filter wider if input coupled to output, which would not be a good thing. So hang on a sec as I do that. Next thing I do is I clean up the board. This is 99.9% pure isopropyl alcohol, also known as rubbing alcohol, except be careful. You can buy 99.9 in a pharmacy, but you can also buy the wrong isopropyl, which has oil in it, so that when you use rubbing alcohol on skin, on humans, it doesn't dry their skin out. So make sure that you're using 99.9. I want to clean off the flux. I was using a flux core solder. And that's just a better deoxidant when you're, trying to solder something. So I just wet my Q-tip and, just clean it off and make sure that there's no flux anywhere left on this circuit board. See, this board was vapor-phased solder in a factory. So it basically went through powdered solder, was applied to it through a silk screen, and then it went through an oven. And of course, it was screened with a type of flux paste that evaporates when it hits the solder. It's called self-clean. But when you're doing this type of work, of course, you're using regular solder, wire solder. That's it. Now it's time to just put it all back together. And I'll do that now, just by reversing everything that I've done. So I'm now putting back all the coax connectors. The best way to do it, by the way, is to take your needle nose, and again, I use serrated half needle nose for everything except for that one connector at the back, which was a little difficult to maneuver, J01, the red one. But otherwise, these flattened needle nose are better, and they are serrated. And you take that and you position a connector. I hope you could see this on a big screen. I just can't get the camera closer, but you just position it like this, and then you place it over the connector and you push it down with your finger gently, and you'll hear it snap in. It'll make a little click, and that's very simple, but use your finger to push it in and just use the needle nose to position it. You did use the needle nose previously to remove it, but you don't do the same thing to put it back on. So the last thing we do is push in the 2 flexible printed circuit boards, the FPCs. And so you just put them over the connector. And by the way, on the back side of the purple support, the plastic support, you can see the pins. And when you push it in, most of those, if you look at them before you put it in, you'll see they're about, I'd say, 1/8 of an inch or maybe 3 millimeters long. So when you push this in, they should just about disappear. And I'm going to check that right now. And yeah, so they're all the way in. Remember, this connector always does show purple. It doesn't push all the way in. I'm just going to make sure it's pretty secure. Same thing for this one. You start off with about, I'd say, 1/4 inch of purple, and by the time you push it in, it'll probably be 1/8 of an inch. And of course, if you look with a flashlight at the back side, the pins will be gone. I don't want to bend it on a sharp angle because you could break it. There, so that's in. Now this is ready to go. Okay, so now we're going to put the filters in the sub-receiver. By the way, if you do download this booklet that exists, it's about 7 or 8 pages, I think. There's a mistake, there's a typo. Once you finish the main receiver, you're going to do the sub-receiver, but they've written main receiver in blue. It's the blue part of this section, if you do find this on the web. I'm going to try to give you the link to this in a little while. Anyway, what I've got to do here is, this is an MP, and it gives you options. And the options are, if you're going to remove this RX unit, which you have to if you're going to change the filters in the sub-receiver, if you don't have the optional pre-selector, which is optional on the 101D, then you're going to remove only 4 coaxial cables from the board. And if you do have the optional pre-selector because you have an MP, then of course you're going to remove 6 cables, and they're all indicated on this page here. But again, I'll try to give you that link before this video is over. So what I'm going to do is remove 6 of them, because this is an MP. And so we're going to start off with, on the left side, we have J03, which is green, and that's right here. So you take it with your serrated pliers and you pull it up very carefully. Again, don't squeeze, whatever you do. So here's J03, and it's off. Then of course you go to J02, which has no mark. As you remember, the last one, 03, was green. This has no ink on it at all, and that's just like that. That's off. Then you take J01, which will be blue, and that's down here again. And again, that's that tight spot between a relay and a shielded can that's here for some RF circuitry. So you want to use a better needle nose for that one and get in. Got to be careful here. There. So this one is now off, and that's the blue one. And if you ever want to pull it back once you've disconnected it, you know, by holding the connector with these needle nose. You can always handle the whole thing, but handle it by the wire. Don't handle it by the connector. So that blue one is off, and that is J01. And we'll go to J09, and that's a black one over here. Of course, you're going to be missing 2 of them if you're doing this on a D, not an MP. There are 6 here. There will be only 4 on a D without the optional pre-selector, because it is optional on the D. So we'll just snap this one off. I've just got to go back to my serrated pliers. I get a better grip on it. It's just that other one area where you need a better needle nose. So there, that black one is off. And then that was J09. And then finally you have J10, which will be red, and that's in the far right-hand corner. The radio, of course, front is facing me, and it's upside down, of course. And that's off. So that's it for those 6. Then, of course, you take off the FPCs once again. So here they are. And I'll probably use my serrated pliers for this. And I go towards the center of the connector when I do that. You got to be very careful. If you ever break these, they're easy to change, but you don't want to go there because you're going to have to wait for one. There, so that's all off. Now I'm going to just undo the 6 screws, and we're going to pull this board out. As you know, the screwdriver is magnetized, so it's just a pleasure to work with. Here's the screw. You can get that magnetizer probably at a hardware store or a hobby shop. Once the screws are out, again, you just pick this up from the back and pull it out. Be careful not to catch any coaxial connectors. And here's your sub receiver. And you see there, on the MP, there's going to be 2 filters going in. And that'll be the 1.2 and the 300 hertz on the sub. The 101D, of course, will have 1 or 2 more filters. And I'm going to be putting them in on a D when I'm finished with this, but I don't think I'll shoot the video because this is pretty straightforward and you could just repeat the process. Well, I just finished installing 2 filters into this sub board, and I've identically actually to the main receiver. You just have to fit the board back in, push it in so that the 2 RCA jacks or phono jacks, whatever you want to call them, are sitting through the back. And then you just lower down the back part of the board. Of course, make sure that when you do that, you recover all of the 6 or 4, depending on your model. If it's a D or an NP with MP has 6, as you remember, because you have the optional pre-selector. Make sure you have all of the 6 coaxial connectors above board. You didn't lose any down below. And the same thing for the FPC. Make sure they're both here, and that's it. And you're ready to start putting things together again. So I'm just gonna center this a little. There, and I guess we're ready to go. So I'm gonna start snapping in coax connectors once again, very same way as I did on the first receiver that I did, which was the main. So I won't go into detail on video because it's just the same thing. Everything is back together, and I have to say that because this is an MP and my power supply is actually in the shack in a cabinet, I just bothered to take the radio over to the bench of the in the shack and try it. And all filters are installed properly. The radio is auto-detecting. In other words, it detects the new filters automatically. There's absolutely no software setting that you have to do. Another thing that I did check, and it's very simple to check this, is the accuracy of these filters. Because I have all options in for both receivers, I was able to select 1.2 on both receivers and listen to the sound of the noise. And even without an antenna, you can tell that both filters are centered perfectly just by the way the noise sounds. The pink noise that comes out, noise of course that's bandwidth restricted, is considered pink. The sun is white noise, but nothing else is really and truly. So the pink noise sounds identical. You could hear the lows and the highs in the noise on each filter in both receivers, and they're exactly the same pitch. So these filters are very accurate. There's no alignment required, And as I said, they're auto detect, so once you install them, they'll just come up on your screen. I'm going to close this up now and say see you later, and hope this helps everybody. By the way, I will add that I'll give you the website in a few seconds for the printout. The site where you could find this booklet is on FTDX101D at groups.io, and it was posted on March 13th of 2020, and you'll see a PDF there, a link to a PDF. If you can't find it, you could probably look me up on QRZ and drop me a line, and hopefully I'll see that. I get inundated with lots of email these days, but I'll do my best. Good luck, and again, be very careful. If you're not experienced in this type of work, I would caution you against it, only because you can cause damage to the radio, and I certainly assume no responsibility for anything that you might want to try on your Yaesu. And I guess that's it from here. See you later. This is V2AED.